All right. It is Sunday. I hope my audio and everything is working okay. Lighting is all right. My brain is semi-functional, so we'll see how it goes. It is the Khrysalis Studios Sunday stream time. It is Sunday morning. That's generally when we do it. I wanted to do a bit of a themed one today because I think that'll be a little bit interesting to show you guys kind of how I go, what my thought process is behind picking a sculpture, how they come about, where those ideas kind of come from, a little bit about how I make them reality, if that makes sense. It's kind of a cool skill to be able to take something that just exists in your brain or sometimes in a reference photo and then make it into a real thing that like you can touch and paint and customize and do cool stuff too. So I'll go over a little bit of that stuff, some studio updates. Briar didn't really have anything else going on other than 5,000 different sales. Looks like their last Collectors Club one ends today. So that generally means that the Stablemate Club probably is going to show up tomorrow. So we'll see how that goes. So for the internationals, we get all three at the same time. And for whatever reason, they don't let us or like to let us overlap things, which would save on shipping for internationals, but that's okay. So I'm debating now if I wait to save on shipping or if I save the 30%. Which one will work out better? Because shipping up here is not great. And I know shipping internationally to like the UK and Australia is even worse. So we'll see how it goes. I just checked and they don't have any other new products. The Blue Zeus pin was the last thing that popped up on their thing. And they were showing some updates with Briarfest on tickets. So there's no wristbands now. Everything's on one master QR code, which means that you can't swap codes, which is probably not a bad idea because I think they had some issues with that last year with people not in or unintentionally giving away codes. We have Nash playing with his squizzle. He's just going to have a ball back there. And you can kind of hear I'm a little bit sick. So I've been fighting off something. My husband lovingly gave it to me on my birthday, which is a great present to get. So I've got a little bit of like a sinus thing going on. It took me out last week for a day or two, but I'm just annoyingly irritated by the remaining stuffiness. So if I cough or I'm all stuffy, then that's why. We have people in the chat already. There's Julia. Hi, good morning, Julia. Amy, good morning. Brenda, good morning. Kristen, good morning. Lizzie's here. Hi, Lizzie. Julie said PC2. We haven't got that email yet. Oh, yeah. There's also that. Corinne. Hi, Corinne. Allison. Hi, Allison. Laura Rocksmith. Hi. He's a very happy doggo. So we've had him as of yesterday for 2 months. So he loves the smaller the toy, the better. He's like the happiest dog with little things. We actually got a little 11 cubic foot upright freezer to help store food and treats and stuff for him. So he's not spoiled at all. That'll be a good thing for us now because our other freezer's just a chest freezer and everything gets lost in the bottom and it's not the best idea for me because then I just have to go digging. So yeah, other Briarfest updates that they had, there was a master QR code. There was, so your QR code you can't give it away for the show because then they have access, whoever you give it to would have access to all the stuff that's associated with your ticket, all your models, all your everything. And they're expanding it out to Thursday, but Thursday is limited in the fact that it is workshops and the show is being expanded. And you can only participate, it seems like you have to choose between Resin Renaissance and the Briarfest Open Show because they will overlap. So I'm staying out of it. You guys can let them know what your opinions on all that is. That's the best way that I suggest you just contact them and let them know what you think. That's the only way that they know if their decisions are good decisions or they work for you or they don't, or you love it or you don't, or you want to see more of it. So let them know. One of these days I'm going to get a phone call. Stop telling them to do that. But yeah, until then. Doggy butt wiggle. He's a very wiggly dog, so he'll like full body wiggle and he turns into quite the land seal. It's fantastic. He's so fun. But he's definitely opened up quite a bit from where he was not even too long ago. Getting a little sassy because he is a teenager, so that happens and it's cute. We like him. Yeah, chest freezer into the abyss. Pretty much. I lose stuff and then it gets freezer burnt and then I am sad. So and then I can't find my ice cream because it dies to the bottom. And I actually have a set of colored epoxy that I wanted to test out the differences in like the working properties of that I found when I was going through the other freezer. It was buried in the bottom. So that's the thing. I'm better with drawers. Drawers will be more functional for me. And then I can know this is the ice cream dessert drawer because you need one of those. And then this is for veggies and this is for this. So that it'll keep me a little bit more organized. The big chest freezer for like big bulk boxes of stuff. I think that'll work out a little bit better. So, and we renewed our Costco membership. So I'm sure that that won't be hard to put big boxes of stuff in. And I'm pretty sure the only reason why they give out snacks at Costco is to keep you from killing everybody. Because I went in there and I'm like, it's a weekday. It shouldn't be this busy. It's ridiculous. It is also close to Christmas. But, oh my God. And people are just so peoply. There's no rules. And nobody, we're in Canada, but nobody's friggin' polite. It's crazy. But anyway. Let's see. Brenda, he's looking more at home and relaxed. He is. He's definitely settling in, which is really good to see. And we keep taking him to this dog park, and he loves sniffing around. And it's a enclosed dog park, so it's private. You rent out an area, and it's fenced, so you can let them out without worry about other people's dogs getting to you or whatever. Because the dog parks are hit and miss. A lot of our friends have had their dogs attacked at dog parks by dogs that don't have manners. And he doesn't have a good enough recall to be able to say that if in a situation I would be able to get him back 100%. So until that happens, I am not taking him to a public dog park. If I do at any point, he'll probably go to doggy daycare to play with other dogs and then play with friends' dogs before he does the big park, if he does. But yeah, we've got these big parks you can rent out. Some are treats, some are open, some are obstacle agility, and then they can go in there. And he just loves sniffing and running through the trees. And he's happy dog, spoiled dog. Julia, testing boundaries, good sign. He's acclimated. Yeah, he's barking at us. He'll sass back. So I've been trying to get him to go from sit to down to sit again. And he's like, I just did sit. I am not going back to sit. I would prefer to stay down. And I'm like, no, you gotta sit. So we're working on stuff like that. And then he's sassing my husband a little bit because he's not here normally, but that doesn't generally go over well because he's like, I don't fall for sassing. It's kind of funny to see, actually. So he's happy. Oh, hi, Michelle. No one's nice here at our Costco, says Allison. Yeah, it's hit or miss. And then people are just grumpy and vicious, even if it's happy times. I don't know. But they're snacks. Snacks keep you from killing people. So we'll go with that. Amy says, oh my God, it's nuts everywhere out in public. And people forget how to drive properly. That is also true. We've had some really icy conditions, and they just go off the road, and then it is bad. We had so many people in the ditches recently because it just turns to ice, and we get Chinooks, so things warm up and then they refreeze when they've melted. And it's been a really weird fall in that we've actually gotten a fall. It is now December 8th. And I have strawberry plants and a whole bunch of other plants that are still growing active leaves outside. And we live in Canada. I don't know if the plants know this, but I don't know what's happening. It's normally frozen by now enough for everything to go dormant. But we had carnations up until a couple weeks ago still outside, and that's October, plants die. So it's weird. And then so I've got strawberries. I'm like, maybe I'll get some strawberries. And then the raspberry plant's got another cane that popped up. I'm like, I don't know what's going on. My coneflower's popping up again. Maybe we'll have a second summer. Nobody knows. So yeah, that's the thing. As you can see behind me, that's a brick shop. I've been busy casting the Bombay, if that's the plural of bombuses. There are a bunch of them in there. Wow. And there's a bunch. You guys probably get nervous because it's moving in the box. Bunch there too. They are progressing really well. We got the upgraded pressure pots. My husband had to do some welding and adjusting to them. So he did that. And that's such a good skill to have. He's been teaching me how to weld a little bit, which has been really cool. And work with tools and not be afraid of like the grinder and all the scary stuff. So you never know. Might lead to like a full-size horse sculpture at some point. They've been casting up really super nice. Like they're that's the porthole coming out of his tail, but the seams are pretty well non-existent. Of course, with you guys, I tend to over prep them and clean them up really nicely for you. This one's got a spot on his butt, but that's not anything other than a little bit of dirt. All the seams worked out really good. He comes out really nice, which is good. There aren't any major issues with this guy. He's got a few areas to soft set. So when you're pouring for the pressure pot, instead of pouring into wherever your pour hole is in a rotocast mold, which is usually for us the bum, for some others the belly, or wherever they choose to put it, and then it roto casts things. These ones have sprues, so sprues come off like his mane. I've shown you guys the mold before, the tip of the tail, and everything vents out airwise out here. So generally you want things angled a little bit so that all the air will flow out of like the front of a hoof or the little tippy of a hair, or just trying to keep things from having spots where air gets trapped. And if air does get trapped, so for him, he's got a soft set in his nose. You're not going to be able to tell. All it is us pouring a little bit, and this happens with every caster, pouring resin into areas that are troublesome or like to cause problems. So the tip of his horn, his ear, his nose. There's a couple spots in his foot. This whole toe gets soft set, and everything bonds together because we're pouring it within a short period of time. The soft sets happen, and then the wires go in, and then more soft sets happen, and then they go right in the pressure pots. Well, we got 5-gallon pressure pots that he built legs on, tilted them on their side. Which is a little scary when you're running bigger pressure pots because it's a lot of pressure. It's like 40 to 50 psi. And it's a lot of pressure. We've got a giant air tank outside that we've had for quite a long time for various uses in the garage and the shop. And I've got 2 of these big pressure pots. And you could put a whole bunch of molds in them if you really wanted to. We're only running one at a time because with his length, he is as long as the max capacity of these pressure pots because he needed lots of hair. The strawberries are confused. Michelle's saying, my dad liked to take us to Costco for the free samples and said, see, I took you out for lunch. My dad did the exact same thing because he was like, we'll wander around here. I'll get stuff. The kids will be entertained because there's lots to look at and we'll get free things to eat. So it's kind of fun. Lizzie says, Costco's are crazy 24/7. I swear. BJ's wholesale is much nicer. And I don't understand why, because it's essentially the same thing. We don't have that here. There's a couple wholesale type warehouses or smaller. So it's harder for those things to operate. But I'm glad you have an alternative that's not as crazy. Lizzie, did someone just break? Saw something fall when you grabbed the box. One of the sprues popped off. So nobody broke. All the horns and stuff are still intact. So yeah, it's been fun. He's working it really good, knock on wood. And his little bits also need to be soft set because otherwise he'd have to have a little sprue, which is awkward. So yeah, it's always takes a couple castings to kind of figure out the bugs with each because each has their own personality. With rotocasting, you sometimes have to adjust the inner and outer spin speeds to make sure everything gets in the right spots. So everything has its own persnickety things. It's not like you just take the horse, pour the goo in, and then ta-da! There's like 7,000 steps to each. And then each horse takes a while, obviously, to clean up afterwards. But they are turning out lovely. I'm very excited for you guys to get these in hand. They're starting to ship out this week because swag is here on Monday. I'm excited. But I did want to show you something else that I found for the boxes because the little honey candies in a flower shape for a Bombus because he is a bee evolution. are too fun. And they're tasty. So they're just pure honey that's been distilled down, I guess. I'm very excited. So obviously, normal treats, extra treats because they're themed. And then all his stickers and the Ponyfest cards. So one of the things that is coming for Bombas is his own Ponyfest card, which will have his data on it and a fun little quote and stuff. And then his little certificate. So that is here supposedly Monday. All of our shippers are struggling. Two of our main ones have now shut down some operations because they've reached max capacity and they don't have the ability to take in more packages because Canada Post is still down as of we're going on the 4th week now. So there's no end in sight. And I have boxes that are in various states of who the heck knows. So don't send anything to Canada if you can avoid it, generally speaking, unless the person really, really wants it, because they'll have to find a different method to do it. And that generally costs a lot. So yeah, that's a thing that happened. So we'll see how that works out for the Medallion Club at the end of the month. I have a couple different workarounds. I used workarounds last time, so you don't need to worry about it. If you have Canadian boxes, I'm reaching out as I get to you in shipping and figuring out alternatives. I can still send stuff different ways. It just might be a little bit more depending on what we're looking at and if you want things with signatures and stuff. Julie says, we appreciate the extra attention. Yeah, it's hard to find preppers. Prepping sucks. It's a little bit easier for me to go over stuff if I know it. And it's nice to get something that you can just go over quick and paint. So hopefully that helps because I hate prepping. And I was looking at some of my older resins and how they used to come, which is no fault of any caster. We've just gotten more picky and I'm really, really anal. So yeah, that's a thing. Sometimes I wish I wasn't this way because it would be a lot easier and I could move faster, but I know you guys appreciate it. So I will keep going. Bombay is definitely the plural of Bombas. Alicia says, I used to go to Costco half an hour before closing. Had good luck. Oh, don't like the one in Kelowna. People are rude. Kamloops is okay. That's not too bad. So then we've got a few in Calgary. There's a north one and a south one. And we've got some obviously in other cities, but the one that's closest to me is a fair bit closer. So I'll try the just before closing and see how that makes a difference. I don't know if I can make it through there in half an hour though, because I like looking at all the things. And there's so many things to look at. Lizzie says, why decide to solid cast him instead of rotocast? He doesn't actually have quite enough room inside of him to rotocast. So you need enough. Well, he would be very hard to rotocast successfully with air in the middle of him because there's so many places for resin to go. And I also wanted to make sure that he was going to balance appropriately. So you can see he's got lots of hair and he balances only on his 3 legs without a stand or any sort of anything. And to do that, if you had an air bubble in the middle, he would likely also tip. So there's a couple different reasons. In retrospect, might have been easier to put him on a base with magnets, rotocast him and not have to upgrade the pressure pots, but yeah. And he's not too bad for weight, because that's always a consideration as well. Because when you look at like the Venti versus him, little bit of a difference in size. And then I moved them. I had Whirlwinds, and he makes Whirlwind look like he's about to eat him. Dylan, hi Dylan, how's it going? Just got in for bringing in our Christmas tree. We can only get little ones here right now. I have not seen a reasonable sized Christmas tree anywhere. Unless you want fake. All the real ones that I've seen are all tiny. We have a fake one, but it didn't make it up last year, and I don't know how we're going to do for time if we're going to be able to get it up and decorated with time to spare. But it's Nash's first Christmas here, so we have to do it for the child. Let's see. So yeah, everything, we'll start seeing all the rises have shipped, and then all of the Bombuses are going to start shipping right away here. I'm getting time payments caught up, so you guys should be seeing your invoices soon here. I just don't like to send them right after you pay your deposits. because I know that that makes some people feel pressured. So no freaking out. Jennifer, hi, good morning. Let's see. He's nice, just not a fan of the mane. Not everybody's into the big hair, so, and it's not exactly an easy sculpture to remove all the hair from. There'll be more coming soon, don't worry. All right, on that note, I will talk a little bit about my process, because that was kind of part of the point of picking a theme today, was to do the thing. So, some of the ponies, I've kind of discussed a little bit about this before. Some of the ponies that pop into my head are, I want to do a breed, or I want to do a specific pose, or I want to challenge myself with a specific pose, or I see a reference photo somewhere, something, and I'm like, that, I need to make that. And it resonates on this level that I can feel in my brain and tingly soul thing. Tingly soul thing, that's a technical term. And if I lose my voice at some point, I will laugh hysterically, and it will be funny, because it kind of feels like that might be coming. So yeah, I see a thing, or I want to challenge myself, or I want to work on like a muscle. My brain goes and sees like a cutting horse and goes, that would be really cool to do, because there's so much dynamic down movement that I'd have to learn so much to figure out how to get that just right. And I like feeling the sculpture in my body as I'm making it, if that makes sense. So like feeling how the muscles would be working and kind of the mind state you'd have to be in. It's a whole process. And I really enjoy the scientific part of it as well as the creative part, because my brain's kind of balanced both ways. And sometimes I favor one or the other. With something like Bombas, it's obviously a little bit more the fantastical feeling, emotional. He had a lot of romantic stuff going on in him. I wanted that redemption arc of him being bullied and then being like, haha, I'm the first one to evolve. Look at my amazing new form. Stuff like that. So kind of depends. There's a few different angles that I come at it from. It's not just what should I sculpt today and finding a picture and then making that picture. There's a little bit more to it, for me at least, in my process. And generally speaking, at any given time, I have 5,000 different ideas going on and kicking around in there. And usually they're little like spirit essences, if that makes sense. I've got a couple of ones in there right now that are trying to kick their way out. And it's hard because I'll be working on something and then those ones are troublesome and they come in, they're like, do me. And they usually try and win, and I have to try and suppress them and placate them and give them snacks and be like, next time. So we'll see how those ones get dealt with. But sometimes I can just anchor in on one of those. And that's what's going to happen for a sculpture that's coming up here soon, is I am letting one of them out of the gate, and it's going to be quite the process. So I'm going to try and document it so that there's a little bit more to it. I struggle with stuff like that because it's that jog in the line of process, and I struggle with stopping and starting, and that can be a stop and start thing that makes it too clunky to flow. So I'm going to try my best to document it. It might be a little grumbly and pieced together, but we're going to try. I might be able to make it work. We'll see how it goes. And if I mess it up and I only have the first part and then like the last part, then you guys hopefully will give me a little bit of grace and understand why. Jennifer says, if I see a Bombas without the mane, then I'm going to have to hound the artist about how in Tarnation they removed all of that. Me too. Somebody was like, I want to see the other side of his face. I'm like, have fun digging that out. It'll be interesting. And then balancing him. Karen was saying, is the Canada Post strike over? No, it is ongoing with no end in sight, and the company might go bankrupt before they solve it. So, yay. I'm going to try and catch questions and things as you guys pop up, but I'm also going to keep rambling because it's a fun thing. So one of the ideas that I had that hasn't made it all the way out into fully being fleshed out is a horse that I saw that was a Belgian at the Calgary Stampede, and I wanted to do something a little bit bigger than like our normal 1/9 scale traditional. So he's a little bit bigger than traditional, but you can see here how I flesh them out to start with. If I'm working in something like epoxy, similar process if I'm working in an oil-based clay. Generally speaking, I prefer to do most things in epoxy. I've been messing around a little bit with Super Sculpey. He is Super Sculpey in epoxy. Super Sculpey has a softener in the clay that causes problems. So that can be a little bit frustrating, but it is a little bit easier because once you have this react and harden, you got to Dremel it, which not everybody likes. And my body's getting a little bit more sensitive to epoxies, so I'm trying to shift over into things like Monster Clay. Then you're getting into needing to do waste molds. So there's pros and cons for each of the methods that you use, but the basic structure of how you build them out is the same. There's wires underneath, and I use Lynn Fraley's concept of how to do the armature. So there's one wire that runs from the nose down the neck, and it doesn't go to the top of the neck. It actually follows the curve down here and into the spine, and then forms the spine and then the little tailbone, and then one for each side of the horse. You would have one for the right side that goes from the bottom of the hind foot to the bottom of the front foot, and then same goes for here, also forming the scapula. I like to go all the way up and form the top of the scapula too. Some people don't go all the way to the top. Some people form just the bony part, leave the cartilage part, and then go down from there with obviously some width for the front of the horse and width for the back of the horse. Filling it out in like a silhouette style kind of gives you an idea of what's gonna need to be there. It helps your brain see it rather than just being little spaghetti noodle wires. It's really hard to visualize a horse when it's just wires. You could also take a photo of it and draw over it in an iPad, or start with a reference photo and then put your armature in there. That might help too. Lynn uses transparencies. So you can do a transparency overlay of kind of a general, either your reference photo or a general reference of a horse, and then kind of build it out from there. So you got proportions, because it's really hard, especially if you're inexperienced, to build something out and see it without the shape being there. Because if you weren't to put all of the bum in, so he doesn't quite have all of his bum in, it looks a little funny, especially for his size. Like, he doesn't look like a big chunky draft horse just yet. He looks like he might be, but he's not all the way there yet. So you can tell he's kind of more of the American style because he does have the longer legs, but you could fix that. You could make him bulkier and change the proportions. And that's why it's also easy for things to go really out of whack really quick, because you're building in 3D and it's so easy to proportionally expand his bum and then feel like you need to do that for the rest of it. And it's like a chain reaction domino. And then all of a sudden you're like, how did I get a blimp? I don't know what happened. It's fun. I love 3D sculpting and all of the different parts to it. I do sometimes do digital sculpting. Depends on what I'm needing. So for something like Briar, sometimes it's a little bit easier to do a 3D sculpture digitally. They can see it in 3D as a model through different programs, and then it's easier to make changes and then reverse changes or whatever you need to do to make it work. Something like ZBrush allows you to say, take this horse and go, oh, I want to see the leg moved forward more, and then the back leg, hi, sweetheart, and then the back leg move back more, and you can do a variation of that file and not wreck the original file. And then if they say, oh no, we don't like that, how that works, then you can put it back. Whereas with like Fireheart, I originally did him in epoxy, and then they said, oh, well, proportionally, we want him to be bigger. That's not the easiest thing to do in epoxy, because now you have to make the whole thing bigger, and you can't do that. So we ended up having to scan him to make him a little bit bigger and make some adjustments. But something like, oh, we want you, so with Justify that I did for Briar, they wanted the front end moved, and that took grinding everything off, putting it all back on. And if it hadn't have worked, we couldn't go back to the original. So for some things like commercial work and with other people, even if it's like a portrait, sometimes it's easier to have the digital option. There's pros and cons to everything. So it kind of depends on what your process is. I do it all because they all have their different pros and cons. And then this is an example, and he got smooshed. Sad leg. This is my turbo from working at Lynn Fraley's Wire to Winnie a couple years back. He is done in monster clay, which allows you to keep working on it. Like you can see here, his leg can be mushed back into place and fixed. It is not solid. It is reasonably solid enough that you can, because I have a harder clay that I use, you can use a soft, a medium, or hard, or mix them. I like to mix medium and hard to give me something that's a little bit more firm. And sometimes it's nice to just use hard clay on things like the face and delicate details, because then it'll not be mushable as easily. Something like this, you would need to, you can screw him off the base and he'll come with his pipe. But let me try it. So the pipe will unscrew from the inside if I had a wrench, and then he will stand. So you could technically mold him as one thing. It's a little harder to get final details in something like this. You could do those final details in epoxy on this. You can prime this clay and then melt it to pull the impurity primer out of it later. It allows you to build forms really fast, still keep working on it. So it's a little bit of the best of both worlds of epoxy and something like a Chavant, which I don't personally like. And then dig things out. So you can see I dug his shoulder out to move things around a little bit. And he's got a little bit of a lean too, which I quite like, because this was actually a photo of Turbo that I took, and he was leaning over to look over and looking back at where we were in the barn, and he heard his buddies call him. So it was kind of fun. A little bit of contrapposto-y playing with shifting of weight and movement. And normally if they were shifting their weight like that, this foot would be forward and this one would be back. But in that particular moment, that wasn't where his feet were. So I thought it was kind of fun. It looked a little bit neat. Ooh. So I'll use this, like the workshops, it's really nice because it allows you to build some confidence. You can do a waist mold and put silicone over top of it. You could even take something that you've made, which is what Kitty Cantrell does a lot, is you take your digital or your clay sculpture, scan it, either clean it up and finish it digitally, and then print it. So that's also another option with current technology. So it's kind of fun. I quite like him. He'll get finished one day. He's going to be a little bit more difficult to cast because anything with a head turned, especially when you're rotocasting, it's hard for the resin to get into the head and then cycle its way back through the body. So you normally have to have a connector that goes from the head to the body to make sure that the resin can get back through, as I stab him in the neck, and continue to flow around the horse. So yeah. You would think that legs together too would be easier to cast, but they're not necessarily. It's better if you can see, the more of each leg you can see, the better it is. It's a little bit easier to deal with. So it's kind of fun. So I'll normally flesh them out. Having a solid plan for where I want them to go almost never works out. So with some exceptions, so Bombas didn't stray too far from where he was in his original drawing. He kept kind of to it, which was kind of nice. That doesn't always happen. And so fun. They'll have the mind of their own. So Turbo has been a little bit more of an idealized version because the real Turbo is quite short and squat with his tiny little legs and his horse-like body. He's basically pony-sized. So I kind of made him a little bit more leggy, a little bit more idealized, made it a little bit more fun. Something like Biter, when I was sculpting her, it was playing with the idea of kind of what I wanted, the feeling I wanted, with the armature and a juggernaut. So I had a juggernaut and I was moving the armature to kind of get, and I can feel when that pose is right and when that expression is right. So I wanted that twist and turn and the feet pushing out to the side and just playing with little tweaks to see what I liked. So she was very much evolving as I went without a full final idea of what was going to be there in my head. This guy, I think, is going to evolve a little bit as I work on him. There's not a lot of, obviously, expression to the pose because he's just standing, but there's a lot of stuff going on that I want to play with in the face and some fun stuff. The new one that I'm going to be working on, so I've got one traditional one that's basically ready to go. There's a few things I want to tweak on it that I haven't shown you guys. It's coming in the new year. It was more built like Biter in that I wanted it to interact and express itself. Trying to do this without giving spoilers is hard. Interact and express itself with another piece. So it's going to be interesting to see how you guys like that when it comes out. But I enjoy that because there's a lot more of that feedback and play and emotion to it in that way. Whereas Bombas was fun in a different way because he was playing with a different emotion in its own encapsulation. Now I'm using big words. No fancy. And then same kind of idea. So when I did Tiger Lily, we obviously had Fireheart. I had an idea for the expression I wanted in her to be free and wild and have a lot of hair to match his because it's fun. Being a little bit more performance friendly. So there's obviously stipulations that kind of change things as you go. There was limitations with the plastic process of posing and with not having a base and stuff like that. And then the full, I wanted them to kind of work in a group together. So it made sense if they were placed together because they're supposed to go together. They could be in any poses at all and still work, but I wanted them to work with the poses that they had. Teasers are killing me. Sneak peek time, people are saying. Hi, Shari. Hi, Candace. I'm rambling about my process. Careful, you'll make them dizzy. Just keep turning them on the stand. What don't you like about Chavant clay? I just don't like it. And there's some people that you got to try kind of all the mediums and see what works best with you. And keeping in mind that there's that initial learning curve with anything. So you kind of have to play with it enough to get over the frustration of knowing how to use it and then figure out what you like about each of them. Super Sculpey is really nice to build in, and then you can bake it, and then you can keep building on it and bake it. But then it's fragile and finicky when you get to the fine detail stage, and putting epoxy on it to blend doesn't work as well as you'd hope. But it does have its benefits for building something out quick. Kitty's probably got something smart going on with making something in clay quickly because you can flesh that out really quickly, scanning it and then producing it in 3D. I don't have my scanner working yet. It is sitting right there in my corner and it is just sitting there. Because why would I need it to do stuff? It's a whole thing. They don't make it anymore, so they don't make tutorials for how to set it up, and it's challenging. And I haven't had time, to be honest. So yeah, and then this other thing that I'm going to be letting out of the gates of my head because it won't stop is it's going to have a fun spin on it at some point, but so hard to do this and not give it away because I'm so bad at hiding things. You guys might think I'm good, but I'm really not. It takes a lot of effort. I'm going to be opening the gates and letting this thing out. And for it is quite the little being. It wants to be in so many different poses. It is a soul that wants to be made into solid, but it has too many things going on and too much energy to wrangle it into one being right now, which has been part of the problem. So some of them are like, this pose, we can work out the details and go from there. And then some of them are like super easy. They're like, exactly, I want to look like that. And then there's generally not a lot of variance. And then this one is like a wildling. So we will see. It'll be fun because sometimes that back and forth with the piece of like, do you want this? No, that's not right. And then you work more details out and it's like, I don't like that at all. I want to be like this. So part of the process for me is having some of the easier ones and then having some of the more pain in the ass ones. Pardon my French. It's quite a thing. So we will see. Hi, Rebecca. How this one comes out, but that gives you a little bit of an idea of the process. I know it's a little. People want things that are A plus B equals C, and that with art, especially for me because I'm so feel based, isn't exactly how it works. And then for finding references and things, a lot of times I won't have a specific reference for a piece. I have to go find them, and being creative about what poses you might find. So if you were doing like a barrel racer and there's so much dust you can't see the legs, finding horses that are spooking or something in another position, you try and think about that pose and when that might happen. If you were doing bullfighting, you might see similar type poses. Trying to find other poses of that, like other opportunities for that same pose to happen, and then finding those pictures because you're almost never going to find everything you want exactly in the same place you are thinking you want to look. So if you were looking at doing a barrel racer, to do a barrel racer, you're not going to find everything you need in barrel racer photos. It's just not going to happen. There's tack on. You can't see the legs in a lot of the positions. Sometimes you can't see the feet because usually there's some sort of dirt and stuff getting kicked up. You're not necessarily going to be able to see every angle. So there's some that's elaborating with knowledge you have of the anatomy, which is why anatomy is really good to know, and biomechanics and conformation. Different breeds affect different things. So you can't take a draft horse barrel racing and make an Arab barrel racing out of that reference photo without a lot of knowledge and ability to play with things and other references of Arabs doing Araby things. So there's many things that go into the process of making a pony. But if you guys have questions on any of that, just tell us about the pony. Let's see. Tell us. People are already guessing what it might be. I'm not going to give you anything. Ha 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 ha. Lizzie says I barrel race my. I've seen barrel race. It's not that they don't exist. I'm just saying if you wanted to do like an Arab barrel racing, you couldn't use a draft or barrel racing to easily reference for the sculpture. But it is very cool to see mules and Arabs and draft horses do things that you wouldn't expect them to, like barrel racing. So, yeah, that's kind of the process. I have other stuff I could show you, but I can't because it's not peekable yet. So that gives you kind of an idea of where things come from. Not all the time will I have sketches. That's kind of rare because normally I'm going off of a feel, and if I stick it on paper, sometimes that takes the creative energy out. For things like the troublemaker in my head right now, something like that might help off-gas it a little bit, and I've done some off-gassing with it, and it hasn't helped. So you might see those sketches at some point in the future, but it's a thing. So Rise was, I sketched him, and then he came out exactly like the sketch with basically no variation. So it's all over the place. Kind of find what works for you. For some people, they need to sketch it before. They need to find the references and exact references for them to be able to do it. And that's something that I find in the beginning when you're newer at it. It's good to have exact references rather than trying to elaborate and guess, because then you can see exactly which muscles are on and off and how it's working. And then even that, you're going to want different lighting to show you the forms of the muscles, because it's hard to visualize it in a photo versus when you can touch it. Doing a muscle reference is super helpful for that too. Come here, buddy. So I did this in Lynn Fraley's Wire to Winnie class too. So that shows all the different muscles in 3D. This helps me visualize the 3D-ness of the muscles. There are some 3D models out there. Like, trying not to take everything out. Like that one. I think this is Anatomy Tools horse. And keep in mind that not all of these are 100% accurate. And you have to kind of look at your references, make sure it works for you and it feels right. A lot of times I've gone through my anatomy books and I go, yeah, I don't think that that's the way you say it is. Because you're in anatomy books, you're dealing with people that are usually drawing from other anatomy books. I would name names of bad ones. Where is it? I think it's Peter Goody. Horse anatomy. And I'm not trying to shame or anything, any particular here. So some of these are really good for, there we go. Really good for using for anatomical references if you're a vet or if you're a body worker, but you can tell proportionally from the drawings that their intent wasn't accurate, realistic, artistic representations of the horse. And that continues through the whole book. So buying a anatomy reference, you need to make sure that they look like what you're wanting to produce, because if you're using that as a reference, that's what your stuff's going to look like. And if they're not that accurate about the proportions on the outside of the horse, you're probably not going to get a super accurate horse when you're sculpting from it. Something like this is a little bit more proportional. There's some stuff that I don't particularly like about it, but that's okay. You can edit little things. It's harder to edit something like that where it's the whole thing. So be mindful about the references you're selecting and look for like the Ellenberger. Here. Ellenberger is a really good one. Animal anatomy. I have 2 copies of this. I love this book so much. And it's going to be so small on the screen. That did not make it better. Thanks. We will look at the free preview. It's not going to show. Okay. That is not helpful at all. So I have 2 copies of this because I have parts ripped out of it. It is the book. And I've cut them out, I've scanned them, and I've mirrored them to make it easier for me to reference. So you can see proportionally, that's pretty accurate. It has, this is the Ellenberger one, the an atlas of animal anatomy for artists. It shows comparative stuff, so you can see the outside of the horse, the muscles on the superficial layer, and then the bones inside. That really helps you understand where things are. If things are moving, your bones aren't going to squish as much as your muscles are. There's a lot of elaboration that goes into it after the fact. Kind of where the bony bits of the face are compared to where the fleshy bits of the face are. Sarah Mink on her blog has some really good references of that sort of thing too. You got to dig for it, though. That's another comparison of the bones versus the face. Sometimes it can be good to scan something like this and then color in where the bone is compared to where the flesh is. So highlighting where the bone would be, because that's a harder area. It's going to not be as squishy. It's not going to warp. So like your cheekbone, that teardrop bone there, isn't going to warp as the face is moving, like yours doesn't. Yours stays here. You can still feel it. And then like the bottom line of your jaw can sometimes, if you have fluff there, will get buried if it's closed, but then stretches and you can see it more prominently. There's a whole bunch of factors. Well, my brain loves it. My brain loves the science part. But I really, really like this book. So if you don't have it and you want to sculpt or you want to learn more about anatomy, it's just so good for reference. And then there was the Encyclopedia Atomicae or Cyclopedia. It's going to say no. Yep. No. Cyclopedia Atomic. Oh, come on. Google's like, I don't think so. This is the one that I mean. So this one has a lot of I like I'm still gesturing to the camera and you guys can't see me because it won't put me on the screen. This one's really good for, it's got human anatomy and then a little bit of different animals, including horses in it. It has some really good drawn, looks like cadaver posed things in different weird positions that you don't see in traditional anatomy books. I will see if I can find references from that one. Lynn had them included in some of her references. But I can't find them offhand. It is a really good book. It doesn't have a ton of different references for horses, but there's enough in it to be really good. Like it's got some of the open mouth with the flesh on it, really interesting positions of the legs that are flexed, which I find really helpful and interesting. You bounce back on a lot of things because anatomy books aren't always correct and they are not gospel, and it's different between different individuals. You could dissect two horses and there would be enough noticeable differences that you couldn't 100% say this is 100%. So be careful and don't buy the goodie ones unless you want like massage and general references. Those are some of the ones from the Atlas for Animal Anatomy, the Ellenberger one. So that's kind of a good overview of what you're looking at. This is also where the popular hair chart comes from, where you see this exact drawing with the hair whirl, hair pattern growth stuff on it. It's a really good reference for that. That's in the back of the book, but has lots of good stuff. Taking them, scanning them, reversing them. You can also find most of the pictures from them on already scanned into Google. So if you don't want to buy the book, like here, let's do this. So you can see even in here, something like this doesn't look 100% proportionally correct. Or this one, if you don't want to sculpt it like that, you want to look for something a little bit more accurate. There's some really cool 3D digital models that have popped up, which are really cool. It's nice to be able to take that model and manipulate it in 3D to go, okay, what does it look like from this angle? Like where would that bone be under the surface? That's really cool. You can see Pinterest has lots of different references. Something like this obviously tells you about where the muscles are, but none of that is proportional. This is the same as the gray model that I have from Anatomy Models. It's just colored to look like it's flesh, which is kind of cool. It's got veins and stuff on it. It's significantly more expensive. Here's photos from he's having puppy dreams and barking and growling in his dreams. Either better, he's like, stop. No, they're puppy dreams. This is from the Atlas, the Ellenberger book. You can see tons of photos will pop up eventually from it. You could just find them on Pinterest, find them like this. You don't need the book. I would suggest supporting the authors because they made such a good book. That's that reference model that I showed you guys earlier. There's other ones you can get. So this is a little bit proportionally off, but still kind of same idea. Anything that's going to show you the 3D forms is helpful. I still think this is probably the most accurate one that's out there right now. But there's lots of stuff out there. There's the anatomy references drawn onto a horse, like painted onto a horse, which is kind of cool. It's not going to show you 100% of how that muscle's moving under the surface, but it gives you a good general idea. All those books from Anatomy and Motion are also really good. There's some really cool stuff you can see in there. These are kind of cool when somebody takes like a drawing and then tries to break it down into the bones and then the muscles. Stuff like that. Horse Anatomy Illustrated. I would try and find a whole bunch of different angles you can approach it from. It helps to be a little bit obsessive about and curious when looking into things. When you get into things like dwarfism in a mini, it's going to throw all your anatomy stuff out the window a little bit. So you got to kind of keep things like that in mind. There are really good books on dissections, and it shows you what it looks like when they dissect them and what it looks like on the surface. That is super helpful. Doesn't help if you're squeamish, but still super helpful. There's lots of really cool stuff that you'll be able to find out there. So different references, as many as you can compile. You'll see eventually kind of what to learn to trust and what not to trust. And then you get into conformational things like the placement of the hind legs and the forelegs, what's toed out, what's pigeon-toed. Well, that has an effect on what you're sculpting. There's so many layers. It's like an onion. So yeah, it's kind of fun. I enjoy it. I enjoy the balance of the creative and that more intellectual stuff. Some people lean more towards the 100% accurate without the art part in it. It's always balanced. Let's see. I'm missing people. Davina, I sent you an email a while back. I can talk to you privately about that. Let's see. And you have a box that is on the way. It has been for a bit. Let's see. I too scream into the abyss like that. Just screaming to the abyss. Yeah, so that is kind of the rundown of how sculpting a horse works for me. There's obviously a lot to it, and it's a lot more complex than just A plus B equals C. And that is harder to explain in something like this. It might be something that comes out into tutorial type form that I break down into multiple videos going forward. And hopefully that's helpful. If you guys have questions, the streams are also a good place to ask them. Here, I might be able to help them like for some things. I've had people ask about the whole 3D printing thing, and that's kind of a rabbit hole. It's harder to get into all the things. And my brain does all the things. It doesn't do the little short form answers very well generally. So yeah, that is, without anybody asking any questions about the sculpting thing, kind of where we'll end off today, I think. It is quite the rabbit hole. Maybe it opened up some questions for you guys to go pursue yourselves. I'm going to try and document the next sculpture's progress along the way, the little wildling that I'm going to let out, and show you how that works with the progression from an idea to starting to sculpt it to probably changing things along the way, because this one doesn't seem like it's going to be a straightforward sculpture, and then finishing it up, then maybe even into the molding and the casting. I've done a little bit of documentation on Bombas for the molding and casting and getting into details of kind of how that works a little bit more. There's a lot of physics to mold making and how to do that. So it's its own thing with its own depth. I'm going to try and distill things down the best that I can. I really enjoy jumping down the little rabbit holes, but I'm trying to teach myself to be a little bit more surface level, and then we can dive down in more detail later. So molding videos are definitely something on the roster, but we'll see how it goes. So on that note, I will let you guys go. I will see you next week. Anybody who has a Bombas, you should be hearing from me fairly soon with information about your orders. Some of you have already heard from me. Some of you have already gotten your shipping information for what that's going to look like. Time payments, invoices are going out fairly soon. And their orders are still open until January 15th for Bombas and for Rise. So yeah, I will see you guys next Sunday with more cool stuff. If you have ideas for topics, let me know. By email is the best way to do it, or you can comment on these too.